This Benrus watch is a tuxedo-style watch, and it's kind of unusual because usually a tuxedo watch has a white center, and then the area that the numbers and the hour markers sit in, that band around the edge of the dial, is black on most of them. And some of them also are made in a reverse fashion where it's black in the center and white around the outside of the dial. This one has a white center and a very light gray band around the numbers and the hour markers, and it almost looks like it's more of a difference in texture even than color. It is slightly darker, I guess, so it's kind of an unusual design for a tuxedo watch. I don't know when this one was made. I haven't been able to find in my research any information about this model. I don't know what the model is called. I don't know what year it was made. But first, let's go ahead and look at the initial Timegrapher readings and see what our starting point is so we know where we're starting from and we can see what needs to be improved then. Our initial Timegrapher readings for the Benrus Tuxedo watch, they're not horrible. It's running about negative 17 seconds a day. It's kind of varying a little bit. They exceed negative 19, negative 18, negative 17. 259 degrees of amplitude is okay for a watch this old, but it could be higher. The beat error of 0.8 milliseconds isn't too bad. I'm going to go ahead and service it anyway because I'd like to get the amplitude up higher and I need to regulate it better than this. Negative 18 seconds a day is really not very good, so it's not horrible, but it's not really acceptable to me. I can make it better. I'm going to go ahead and service this watch and take it apart, clean it, relubricate it, put it back together, give it a new mainspring. I'm going to replace the crystal because the old one is so badly scratched up, and we should hopefully be able to get the regulation much closer to 0 seconds per day, maybe just a little bit, I want to try to get it within like between 0 and 5 seconds a day fast. I don't want it losing any time, and I'd like to get the amplitude up a little higher. It looks like it's climbed up to 262 now, but I think we should be able to get it into the 280s probably, if we clean it and relubricate it and give it a new mainspring. The beat error I'll probably leave alone because I think the movement in this watch has one that you can't regulate the beat error very easily with. I think it has a fixed hairspring stud, so I'll probably leave that alone. But the rate and the amplitude I think I can definitely improve quite a bit. I'm ready to begin disassembly of this beautiful old Benrus watch. This is one that I originally thought was made in the 1950s, but after doing some research on it, the movement that's in it was actually made in the 1960s. It's a movement that production started in 1960, so it couldn't have been made any earlier than that. I don't know the exact year or what the model name of it is, but I do know that it was made sometime in the 60s. So the first thing we need to do is get the movement out of it. This watch has a snap-on back, and I went ahead and removed it before I started the video because I was having a difficult time getting it off. I wanted to see what kind of movement was in here. And there's a little lip on the back that is a place where you stick a knife or a tool in there, like a case knife, to pop it open. And whoever had assembled this watch the last time it was serviced put it together with the opening lip right at the crown position, which means that you couldn't use it because if you stuck a tool in there, you could break the crown. So I had a real heck of a time getting it off. So here we can see the movement. And this movement is marked Benrus model DN2A. And Benrus didn't actually make any movements. This was probably an ETA movement, but I don't know what model yet. I'm going to have to take it apart and see what it actually is. We'll see when we get the balance off. Usually on the base plate of the movement, underneath the balance, there's usually a maker's mark. There'll be a mark from ETA or Adolf Child. It'll say AS or ETA or whatever manufacturer. It'll have their maker's mark. And then somewhere on the movement should have the model number stamped too, and a lot of times that's on the dial side of the movement, so we'd have to take the dial off before we see that. So what we're going to have to do first is we need to get the stem out, and this movement uses a stem retaining screw, and the stem retaining screw is that screw right there, so we need to loosen that a little bit. We don't want to totally unscrew it because that stem retaining screw is also what holds the detent lever in place on the other side of the movement underneath the dial. If you loosen it too far, the detent lever will fall off under the dial. Now that may not be that big of a deal because we're getting ready to take the movement completely apart anyway, but sometimes it's tight enough against the dial that it can actually press against the dial and dent it or distort it if you loosen that screw too much. So we want to take the dial off before we loosen it all the way and take the detent lever off. Right now what we want to do is just loosen it enough to let the stem come out, and that usually is 1.5 or 2 turns of the screw. I'm having a hard time getting the screwdriver in there, seeing it under the camera. I'm going to have to look at it up close. Get the stem out. I had to loosen that screw more than I expected I was going to have to get it out. It took about 3 turns of the screw to get the stem to come out. Now this movement has a movement spacer to hold it into the case, so we're going to have to get that out too, and these usually just kind of lift out. Although I may have to take the whole movement. Yeah, I'm going to take the movement out to get it out. It looks like it's not going to come out in the case. So what I'm going to do is take the cushion, lay it on top of the watch, flip it over, and lift the case off. And there's our dial side of the movement. And let's take a look at this and see if we can get that movement spacer off. I'm looking to make sure that it's not screwed on, and I don't see any screws holding it in place. So I think it just snaps on. But I don't want to damage the dial trying to pull it off. I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull the hands first, and then I'll take care of that dial spacer. Normally, to remove the hands, I would put a piece of plastic over the hands and use that as a sort of a protector for the hands and the dial. But because the hands on this are so close to the dial, I don't think I would be able to get my hand levers underneath it if I had that plastic in there. So I'm just going to use this paper dial protector, and hopefully I can get the hand levers under there. Yeah, they're not going to go. They're too thick. How are we going to do this? I was able to get the second hand off all right using the hand levers because it was a little bit higher on the dial. So I've got it right here. The minute hand and hour hand are going to be a little bit more of a pain though, because I really want to be careful not to break them or the post-its they ride on. And I don't know if I can even get the hand levers under them even without a dial protector. I can't. They're too far down there. I may need to get some thinner hand levers for this, or maybe try to remove the hands by pulling upward on the dial. And that's not really the best way to do this either. I need to figure out how to get that dial spacer off now. Oh, there it goes. Now it's starting to come up. Pry it up with a screwdriver. Okay, there's our dial spacer. And see how the dial's on. There's a dial screw right there, which is at the 5 o'clock position. There should be one on the other side of the movement somewhere. Yeah, here's another one. This one's at the 11 o'clock position, so they're directly across from each other. I don't know if I can show that very well, but you can see how close to the dial the lower hand is, the hour hand. Hopefully that's in focus. Let's go ahead and take the dial screws off. When I remove the dial screws, the dial drops slightly, and I think I can get the hand levers under the hands to get them off, but I'm not sure. It's still pretty tight. I'm just going a little bit at a time, slowly, so that I can ease it up enough that I can get the hand levers under a little further. I'm going to finish that off camera where I can tattoo an eyelet and see a little better. I got them. I was able to barely get them under there, enough to lift off the hands, so when we put these back on, we will not push them down that far. We'll make this easier for me the next time I have to service this. Now, you can lift the dial off, and it should just come right off now. And there we go. There's the dial. It's in really beautiful condition. See the back with the dial feet. All right, now here's the dial side of our movement, and we need to remove a few things from here. First, I'm going to take off the dial washer, and then I'm going to take off the hour wheel. They're not usually that hard to lift off here. They usually just want to fall off, so this must have a lot of lubricant in there dried up. There we go. We need to get the cannon pinion off, but I don't want to pull the cannon pinion until we take the minute wheel off, because pulling the cannon pinion with the minute wheel in place can sometimes damage the minute wheel. So first we need to remove the set bridge, which is this piece right here, and it also includes the detent spring, which is part of the set bridge. It's held on by a single screw right there. And there's a little post that gives it some alignment as well. So we'll remove that, and then we can take out the minute wheel and the intermediate wheel, which is right here. And then we can pull the cannon pinion and take out the rest of the keyless works under here. I've removed the set bridge screw, so let's go ahead and get it off. And it needs to have this little spring here dislodged off the detent lever. So I'm holding my fingers over so it doesn't fly up. There we go. Now it should just lift right off. And here is, well, this has got an interesting architecture to it. This has got 2 intermediate wheels, not 1. Here's the minute wheel. And then there's this is the, well, it just fell down inside the little slot where the clutch goes, but this is normally what we would call the intermediate wheel, the one I'm trying to pry back out of here now. Come on. There we go. That's the usual intermediate wheel, but this one has a second intermediate wheel right here. And I haven't seen a wristwatch movement built like that. I've seen some pocket watch movements that way because there was so much space between the intermediate wheel and the hour wheel, but I have not seen a wristwatch designed this way. It's on a really tall post. It's not one to come off of. There we go. So we have 2 intermediate wheels. Okay, now the detent lever, oh, it's already loose. I loosened the screw enough that it's wanting to fall right off, so let's go ahead and take it off. And now we have to remove, there's a spring right here that goes along here. It's called the yoke spring. And when I pry that out, it's going to want to fly across the room. So I'm going to have to put a finger over it and then use a screwdriver to kind of pop it up out of its little slot and hope it doesn't go flying like the yoke spring did on the last movement that I serviced. It ended up flying about 5 feet away and landing on another table. I was fortunate to find it. So let's go ahead and do that because I can't take out the yoke or the clutch until we get that spring out. And I'm going to have to do that off camera because trying to do that under the camera lens without it flying away is not easy. That was actually easier than expected. It came up and it didn't want to fly away. This spring is unusual too because most of these yoke springs are shaped like a cane. They have a curve at the top that's and a shorter, one side is shorter than the other. But this one has, both sides of it are about the same length coming down from the curve at the top. So that's kind of an unusual design too. I wonder who made this movement, if it is an ETA movement, because the shock protection system is something I've not seen before on any other movement also. We'll know once I get the balance off and see the maker's mark under the balance wheel. So let's go ahead and take out the yoke, and it should just lift right out here. And then we can get the winding pinion and the clutch. And that should be everything for the keyless works. The only thing we need to do now is get the cannon pinion off, and I'm going to use a pen vise for that. Here's the end of our pen vise. I've got the smallest jaws installed on it. This pen vise I use has interchangeable jaws. It's got 4 different sizes you can choose from. I use the smallest one for cannon pinions on wristwatches because they're very thin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the movement base plate, and you can see the cannon pinion sticking up there in the middle. That's the piece right here. It's got a gear at the bottom and a tube sticking out the top. I'm going to put the tube into the pen vise. Just like that. Tighten the pen vise on it. Nice and tight. And then once it's tightened, I'm going to pull gently. No, you don't want to jerk it off hard because you might bend the spindle that the cannon pinion rides on. The cannon pinion rides on the lower spindle for the center wheel, and you don't want to bend that. So what I'm going to do is pull straight out gently and give it a little bit of a turn as I pull it. And it pops right off. And now you can see the lower spindle for the center wheel that it rides on. And there's the cannon pinion stuck in the pen vise. I need to put the movement into a movement holder now in order to protect that center wheel spindle from being damaged. I wouldn't want to set that facing down without some spacing underneath it, which the movement holder provides. I like this movement. It mounted in the movement holder a lot easier than most of them do. Okay, now this is the Watchmaker side of the movement, and we can see the first thing we need to do with this is we need to get off the ratchet wheel because the ratchet wheel covers the center wheel. Once we get the ratchet wheel off, then we can take off the train bridge and get the center wheel out. So let's go ahead and take off the ratchet wheel first. I've unscrewed the ratchet screw, so let's lift off the ratchet wheel. There we go. Now let's go ahead and take off, while we're messing with stuff on the barrel bridge, let's go ahead and take off the click and the crown wheel. The click has a standard screw, but the crown wheel is unusual. It has a left-handed screw. And what that means is you have to turn the screw the opposite direction you normally would. So a normal screw, to loosen it, you turn it counterclockwise. On a left-handed screw, you need to turn it clockwise to loosen it. If you tried to treat this like a normal screw and turn it counterclockwise, you would actually be tightening it, and if you kept tightening it, you could strip the threads. So you don't want to do that. You need to be very careful that you remember which direction to turn that screw, and that's only for the crown wheel. And when we put the crown wheel back on, we need to remember that too. We have to turn it counterclockwise to tighten it back up. So we're going to turn it clockwise to loosen it. I've loosened the click screw and the crown wheel screw. The click screw just went flying here. Come on, there we go. And then take off the ratchet wheel screw. And then we can take off the ratchet wheel. And the ratchet wheel is coming off, it looks like, with the ratchet wheel washer stuck inside it. There's a little washer that goes around the post for the ratchet wheel, and normally it stays on the post when you lift the ratchet wheel, but this time it's stuck to the ratchet wheel. The click we need to lift off, and there's a spring under it. And this doesn't have a conventional click spring either. Usually a click spring looks like a cane. It usually starts like right about here and curves around, or it starts here and kind of comes up and curves around like that. This one's got a different spring in there. Let's see if we can lift that out. That spring doesn't look like it wants to come out, so I'm going to have to take off the... Oh, there it goes. Okay, I thought I was going to take the barrel bridge off to get it out. I'm going to have to take a closer look at that too and figure out how it works when we put it back together, because that's an unusual design. Okay, so now we can take off the train bridge, and the train bridge is held on by 3 screws. One screw is here on the end, and then there's one here and one here. I've removed the 3 train bridge screws. The train bridge is probably going to be stuck down because of dried lubricants and whatever, so we're going to use a screwdriver and try to pry it up. There's a little slot here that you can stick a screwdriver into for that purpose. Stick another one in here on the other side over here by the barrel bridge. There we go. The center wheel may be stuck to this bridge too, because it is on a lot of these older ETA movements. This bridge looks a lot like the bridges used on the ETA 1220 movements that I worked on with my grandpa's old watch. Oh no, it's coming off without the wheel. Okay. That'll make it easier to handle too, because the ones with the wheel stuck to it are more of a pain to handle. So there's our train wheels. There's the center wheel, and we can take that out now since we have the can and pinion off. There it is. You can see the long spindle that goes through the bottom of the movement base plate for the can and pinion to hold on to. Next is the third wheel. That's this one right here. There we go. So there's the third wheel. And then this should be the fourth wheel. The fourth wheel has a long spindle on the bottom too, because that's what the second hand goes to. The second hand attaches to that. And then the escape wheel is right here. And I think we can lift it out without taking the balance wheel out. That escape wheel had a huge piece of lint stuck on it too. I had to remove that. May be one of the reasons why this watch wasn't running well. Okay, the next thing we need to do is remove the barrel bridge. And the barrel bridge is held on by, looks like 3 screws too. There's one right here, next to the stem release screw, and then one right over here. I've taken the 3 barrel screws out, and I'm probably going to have to pry the barrel up too, the way I did with the train bridge. So we'll just stick a screwdriver in here and pop it up. I wonder what that green stuff there is. Looks like something marked with a marker, but it could be like mold or something too. There we go. There we go. And now we can lift the barrel out. And we can also lift out the stem retaining screw. This doesn't screw into the base plate, it just sits into a bare hole, because the screw threads on the very bottom of it screw into the detent lever on the other side of the movement. Let's go ahead and open the barrel and see what it looks like inside. I want to see what the condition of the mainspring is. To open the barrel, we set it with the cap side up, and then we put our fingers on the sides of the barrel and push downward gently until you hear it pop open. There we go. There we go. I just heard it snap. It didn't snap all the way open. Need to push it some more. I'm afraid I'm going to damage it pushing too hard, but it's not wanting to come any further. Oh, there we go. Now it's snapped open all the way. Lift the lid off with the tweezers. And there is our mainspring. I'm going to order a new mainspring for this, so I want to take this one out. And what I need to do is get it out of here, starting with the center, because I need to get the barrel arbor off of it as well. And I don't want the spring to go flying out across the room with the barrel arbor stuck in it. And they tend to do that if you're not careful. So I'm going to see if I can loosen the arbor with my fingers here and get it out of there. Oh, it's not going to be that easy for me, is it? It's partially out. You can see I got it partly out there. Oh, there we go. Now the arbor came out. There it is. Okay, now let's pull the spring the rest of the way out. I've had the barrels fly out of my hand while I try to do this because of the amount of spring tension released when you pull it out of there. Oh, there we go. It's unwinding in my hand. Okay, let's see what kind of condition this spring is in. It's all tangled up here. Get it untangled. We'll see if it's been badly set or not. It's not too bad, but I screwed up the end of it trying to get the arbor out, so it needs to be replaced anyway, and it looks pretty old. It's kind of scuffed up looking, so I think we'll just replace it. I need to measure this and make sure what size it is, because when I looked online to figure out what kind of mainspring this took, I got a couple different sizes listed, and I'm not 100% sure if that's the correct movement I looked up anyway. I need to get the balance wheel off and look at the maker's mark and see what kind of movement this is. Supposedly this is an ETA. I think it's an ETA 1280 or 1281, both of which use the same mainspring. So the last thing we need to take off is the balance wheel. But before I do that, I want to take apart these cap jewels, because those are hard to take apart once you take the balance wheel off the movement. And I need to figure out how that works. I've never seen one like this before. It's a very unusual cap jewel design. It's not an ankle block system, but it doesn't look like any of the others, like the KIF system or the Japanese systems like Parashock or Diashock. So I'm not sure what that is. I need to look at that closely under a magnifier and see what it looks like. This looks like it works very similarly to the ankle block system. It looks like that it has a hinge on one end and two little tines that go into slots on the housing on the other end, just like an ankle block. It's just a slightly different shaped spring. This one has the spring going around the edges of the jewel instead of curving inward toward the center of the jewel like an ankle block spring. So I'm going to see if I can take that off in the same manner. And it looks like the way you would do it is you would take the tweezers and push against the little point sticking out here gently so we don't break it. Not quite. I got one side out. Let's do the other. Oh, there we go. Looks like both of them are out now. So this should hinge upward. Maybe one of them's not quite out yet. Looks like this one might not be. There we go. Now it's coming up. It doesn't want to hinge open very far either, not as far as an ankle block goes, so I'll use my jewel picker to pick that cap jewel out. There we go. Now you can see the cap jewel stuck to the jewel picker. There is a jewel like this on the bottom of the base plate too for the lower jewel for the balance wheel, and we'll have to take it apart in the exact same way. Now what I'm going to do with it, since we've got the jewel out, I want to, and it looks like it took out the cap jewel and the main jewel that's underneath the cap jewel came out at the same time. I'm going to have to try to separate those so that I can clean them. What I want to do now is I want to close the spring back up so that I can clean these parts without the spring getting damaged, because these springs are incredibly delicate. I broke an ankle block spring once, and it wasn't fun having to replace it, so looks like I got one side snapped back in. I let it slip off camera where you couldn't see it, but what I did was just kind of pushed on the I can't see well enough to do that under the camera. Let me do that with an eye loop. There they are. Actually, I didn't have either one of them pushed in correctly. When I looked at it under the eye loop, they were both dislodged. So I had to look at it through the loop real closely to get them back in. But I got them set back up. So we can go ahead and take the balance wheel off now, and it's held on by a single screw. So I'll go ahead and take that off. Got the screw off. I just need to loosen the balance cock by sticking a screwdriver into the little slot here and kind of give a little twist to loosen it up. And I want to be careful. I usually hold a finger over it to make sure it doesn't go flying away, because sometimes I've had the balance cock fly off to the side and then it bends up and tears up the hairspring. And you definitely don't want that to happen, because then you need to replace the hairspring. So lift this up, being careful not to stretch the hairspring too much. There we go. Now, I've sat the hairspring here on a piece of Watchmaker's paper, and what I'm going to do is pick up the hairspring and the balance wheel together real gently, flip them over, and then I'm going to try to set the balance wheel into the hole that it would normally go in where the jewel is at, so that the spring stays concentric. Like that. Because you don't want the spring getting distorted, so you want the spring to stay as close to perfectly concentric as possible. And now that I've got it set up like that, I can lift it up carefully so it doesn't flip over, and set it in my parts tray like that, upside down. Okay, there's two more things we need to take off the Watchmaker side of the movement. We need to remove the pallet fork and the pallet fork bridge. And this is the pallet fork bridge. It's held on by a single screw and has two pillars sticking up from the base plate to help align it. And then the pallet fork is under that jewel right there. So we'll go ahead and remove that screw. I can remove the pallet fork bridge, and I may have to pry it up with a screwdriver as well, because it's going to be stuck to those pillars pretty well. There we go. There's a little slot back here to stick a screwdriver in. It's made just for that purpose. It's stuck on one of the pillars and doesn't want to come off. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Now we can just lift the pallet fork out. There's our pallet fork. Okay, the only other thing I need to remove from this movement is the lower jewels for the balance wheel that are on the other side of the base plate. But first I want to take a look at this base plate and see if there's a maker's mark and a model number for this movement, so I know what kind of movement I'm looking at and I know what kind of mainspring to order for it. There's some numbers there. I'm going to have to look at that through a loop and see what it says, because I can't read them on the computer or my camera screen very well. This doesn't have the usual ETA maker's mark, but it does have the number 1281, which that's an ETA movement number. The 1281 was a movement that was introduced in 1960 by ETA and was used in a lot of Benrus watches, so I think it's a safe bet that this is an ETA 1281. So I'll make sure to order the correct mainspring for that movement. And once we get that, then we can reassemble it. And what I'm going to do next, well, first of all, I'm going to take off those lower balance jewels. That needs to be done before we can do anything else. And there's actually a couple other balance jewels a couple other lower jewels down here I forgot about. Okay, we're almost done. I need to remove the lower jewels from the base plate. And there's two sets of lower jewels. One of them uses that weird shock absorber system that I've never seen before, and that's for the balance wheel. And then this one over here, which uses a more conventional cap jewel, is for the escape wheel. So I need to remove both of those. And this one's held on by a screw. I can just lift it off once I undo the screw. This one I'm going to have to manipulate that spring just like we did for the one on the balance cock. So to start with, let's go ahead and remove the one that takes the screw. There's the screw for the escape wheel jewel loosened, and I hate the screws that ETA uses for these lower jewels. They are so tiny. They're very difficult to pick up and very difficult to put back in place. So I use the jewel picker to pick it up instead of tweezers, because they tend to fly off the tweezers if you're not careful. And I'm going to try to use the jewel picker to pick the jewel itself up. There we go. See, it comes right off. So now we need to deal with that shock absorber spring. And it looks like the hinge on this one is on this side, and the springs go in to the grooves on that side. I'm going to try to do this on camera so that you can see it. It's weird looking at the screen to do this because you feel kind of disconnected from what you're working on compared to looking at it through a magnifier. Okay, that one looks like it's out. Let's turn around and do the other side. Okay, it looks like they're both out now. Let's see if we can get this clean the hinge upward. All right, there we go. Looks like the jewel's kind of tilted out of there too. Let's pick it up with the jewel picker. Yeah, the spring closed on it again. There's the jewel, kind of clinging for life to the edge of the jewel picker. And it looks like we got the lower one and the cap jewel at the same time again. So we'll close that back up just like we did the other one. And I'm going to try to do this on camera so that you can see it, but I don't know if I can for sure. Looks like one side's in. Yeah, it is. Let's try the other side now. Oh, no, the other side here I thought was in is not. The one I just pushed in is. Let's try this one again. Maybe that is in. Let me look at that under a loop. My camera screen is too small to magnify it enough for me to see. Okay, we're good. They're both in. So you got to see the actual procedure on camera now. Everything's been taken out of the movement, so now we're ready to clean the parts. I'm not going to make a separate video of the cleaning because the cleaning procedure for these movements is basically the same for every type of watch. So I won't go through the process of showing that because it's kind of tedious to try to film that when I'm working with dangerous chemicals. And I have a video that I made showing the procedure for cleaning a watch. And so I will link to that in the description for this video, and you can watch that if you want to know how to do the cleaning. And then the next video in this series will be the one when I reassemble and relubricate the watch after the new mainspring arrives. And I'm going to order that tonight, and it'll probably be close to a week before I'm able to start the process of putting it back together again because of the time it takes to get the mainspring. But stay tuned, we'll have that ready very soon.